we're going to take a look at a relatively controversial weapon system, and that is the FN SCAR. In 2003, SOCOM put out a request for a modular, reliable, adaptable, and ergonomic weapon system. It was to be chambered in 5.56 and 7.62 NATO. They wanted configurations for close quarter combat, sniper, and standard configurations with barrel swaps that could be done at the operator level in under 5 minutes. This weapon system would be known as the SCAR, Special Operations Combat Forces Assault Rifle. FN Belgium won the contract in 2007 and they began testing the system in 2009. So this rifle here, the SCAR 16, also known as the SCAR L or the Mark 16, was slated to replace the M4A1, the Mark 18, as well as the Mark 12 SPR. While this rifle, the SCAR 17, also known as the Mark 17 or the SCAR H, was going to replace the M14 and the Mark 11. Ultimately, the SCAR L was dropped and never actually adopted by the military. They did adopt the Mark 17 in some limited use. They added it to their inventory. They didn't treat it as a replacement like originally intended and just gave soldiers the option to decide what rifle they wanted to use. The SCAR 17 has a 13-inch barrel for CQB, a 16-inch barrel like you see here, and then also a 20-inch barrel if you really want to reach out. So it's a very versatile platform, whether you're indoors, which would kind of be awful with a 308, but you can do it. If you're using this for more of a makeshift DMR squad level precision gun, you can definitely do that. It's definitely not the best for any of those roles, but it's definitely a rifle that you can just pick up, and no matter what you're going to have to deal with, you know that you're pretty well prepared for it. Now, the SCAR 16 was offered in a 10-inch, a 14-inch, and a 16-inch factory barrel, and this one was a 16-inch that I had actually cut down to 14 inches or about 14.5 inches, and then I had this flash hider pinned and welded on here. Now, like I said, the gas block is something you really need to consider. If I were to chop this thing down to 10 and SBR it, I could have some gassing issues. Now, these barrels are shipped straight from Belgium with the gas block already ported and attached and everything. That is something that you want to keep in mind if you're cutting down a factory barrel. Since I only took a couple inches off this barrel length, it didn't affect anything. This gun still shoots really nice, so that is something that I wouldn't hesitate to do, and I actually like how this gun handles a lot with a slightly shorter barrel. There was a suppressor for these. It's proprietary. You could not get it as a civilian, but FN actually will void your warranty if you suppress these. Now, a lot of people are like, why would I spend this much money on a rifle? I can't even suppress it. So it's not that you can't suppress it, it's just they're going to void your warranty if you do. So think about it. If you sell someone a really nice car, like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a Porsche, and you say, hey, you're only supposed to do oil changes at our dealership, that doesn't mean it's gonna blow the engine if you use your oil in it. But what they're afraid of is that you're gonna go to Walmart and buy some really crap, cheap oil, and it's gonna gunk up the engine and it's going to cause a problem. So FN's basically doing that. They don't wanna deal with quality control issues from other manufacturers, and instead of keeping a list compiled of all the cans that they will let you use, if one of those companies drops quality control, et cetera, that just ends up with more warranty claims. It costs them money, and then they ultimately are going to just have to raise the price of the rifle to cover all of those warranty claims. Don't be afraid to suppress it, just be smart. The Huxworks cans do not add any back pressure, so like a Flow 7.62 or on the SCAR 16, the Flow 5.56, those would be great options. But I have seen receivers where these screws here actually start to back out and strip out the receiver, and you can just add a lot of issues if you really don't know what you're doing. Which target were you shooting at?
Far left.
Instead of just reading a brochure of all the specs that you already know, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience using these rifles, because I've owned both of these for a couple years and I've shot them quite a bit. I've been a big fan of the platform for a few reasons, and then I also do have some gripes about the platform. So I'm a huge fan of the SCAR compared to the M4 or something like that in terms of ergonomics. I personally really like the side charging handle as opposed to reaching in the back of the rifle. Everything is placed really well on this rifle. The controls are very AR-like, but everything just feels really good on it. The rail is relatively short. That is one of my gripes. The gas block is completely exposed with the standard length rail. This rail extension from Parker Mountain Machine, I do have pretty much the entire Parker Mountain Machine catalog on this rifle, and we'll go through that. This adds just a little bit rail to get a light out a bit farther and also protect your hand from accidentally touching that gas block, which can be very hot. So one complaint that a lot of people have is they complain about C-clamping the rifle like they would their AR, and then as the charging handle reciprocates, it'll actually pinch the skin of their hand, which we call scar bite. This actually prompted FN to make a non-reciprocating charging handle variant. SOCOM wanted a reciprocating charging handle, and I think that was actually the best decision. When you disassemble this gun and you see how massive the bolt carrier group is, and there's nothing that's going to stop that thing from firing. Now, when you add the non-reciprocating charging handle, you have a sled that slides over the bolt carrier group, and the bolt carrier group is slightly smaller. And basically, you have a spring and a lever, and it clips onto this little piece in the front upper receiver, and it holds the bolt in that forward position. It's very tricky when you're disassembling the gun then to make sure. A lot of times you'll pull that bolt carrier group out and the sled will separate, or it's honestly just a pain to try and get it back in because you have to push down that clamp that wants to spring back up and latch on to the front, but it is really just a pain, and I was not a fan of it at all. This was actually a non-reciprocating charging handle version, and I swapped all the parts out with a guy that had an old school SCAR 16, and he wanted both of his rifles to be non-reciprocating. I wanted both of mine to be reciprocating, so we swapped parts, and I just like this system a lot better. If you do decide to do something like that though, make sure you're swapping the firing pins and everything, because those bundle of parts are factory picked with a tolerance range, plus or minus, and that's just something you want to be aware of. These rifles did come standard with Picatinny at the front, and as you can see, I deleted that and replaced it with these M-LOK slots from PMM. Again, this rail extension from them, and they do make different lengths of that. Mine is just the shortest version that they have. This is a Surefire Scout on an Arisaka mount. This is actually a SIG MCX mount, if I remember correctly, and it is slightly angled to get the light tight as I can to the gun itself, so that's pretty nice. And then I have the dual switch here on top with momentary and the on-off switch. I also have the PMM extended magazine disconnect here, which is very nice because I have kind of short fingers. And I also have their safety selector caps, which are very nice. They are aluminum instead of plastic like the original. Oversized controls here for the bolt. The charging handle is actually by KDG. When you have an optic, let's say you have knobs on the side like the factory Trijicon mount, a lot of times you'll bust your knuckles by charging the weapon. This angles down ever so slightly, so when you pull it back, you're not going to bust your knuckles on this mount. I also swapped out the factory Trijicon mount for this Bowbro one, and you can actually flip this mount around and put the lever on either side. I put the lever on the side opposite of the charging handle just so that it is absolutely clear on this side of the rifle. All the SCARs, for whatever reason, come with a really awful A2 grip. Now, PMM will modify basically any AR style grip under the sun. So this is a BCM that's been modified. The factory trigger is also atrocious. It is about like a 7-pound pull, if I can remember correctly. But this Geisley has basically no take up. It's a 2-stage trigger, but little take up there and super crisp break. This is just a little bit heavier than an SSAE in an AR platform. They are really expensive on the MSRP just because it's a SCAR. Just like the HK stuff, they can ask a premium for this stuff, wait for a sale, and you can get one of these for like $100 off. The SCAR 20 actually gets the Geisley Super SCAR trigger factory, So that's a very nice upgrade, a few $100s in that gun instead of having the awful FN trigger. And then on the bottom of this PMM rail here, there is one slot for M-LOK. So I have a Samson long grip on here, which is aluminum, and I use this instead of C-clamping the rifle. On the SCAR 17, just because the weight of the front of the gun, I might actually grip it more like this. The guns were originally designed that way for a Knight's Armament grip, and I know that a lot of you guys will really want to C-clamp it, but the rail on here is just so chunky that honestly, it's not something that I would want to do. But in summary, everything feels really well laid out. Even though this gun is modified and it has some extra parts on it, your sling spots right up here, right back here, and then in the stock, and they're all on both sides. On the stock, you have the adjustable cheek riser and the length of pull, which is very nice. So you just have a lot of little features. And on AR, I almost feel like you have too many options where you can mount things wrong easily. And on my AR, I move things around over and over and over again, trying to find out what best fit me. And then when I picked up my first SCAR, I was just like, hey, where do I mount my sling? Well, there's only a few options, so try a couple of them and see what feels best. FN really did all the research and the hard work for you, so there's only a couple ways to do things, and those ways just seem to work. So it's a modular platform, but it's a very well thought out platform, and with some upgrades, you can definitely modernize it. But one of my gripes is that it does need to be modernized, in my opinion. So it's a very cool gun, but you do have to accept some of the issues and understand that it's a very expensive rifle, and even once you buy it, you're going to put a lot more money into modernizing it, so your entry point is going to be a lot higher than just the sticker price that you see on one of these. And another important point is, like a lot of military weapons, this is a short stroke gas piston system. So similar to like an HK 416 or something of that nature, but that adds a lot of weight to the front of the weapon. It's not quite as accurate as a DI, but it is incredibly reliable. And if you're like me and you don't love cleaning your guns after every single time you take them out shooting, it's great because as long as that bolt carrier group is greased or oiled, it's just going to keep running. I don't clean this gun very often, and I never really have any issues with it. So that's something that's really nice, and it's a personal preference thing. For half the price, you can probably pick up a DI AR-15 or AR-10, and it's going to be accurate more so than either of these rifles, and it's going to be lighter weight. Another thing that the SCAR is famously known for is destroying optics. So as you can see on both these SCARs, there are Trijicon ACOGs. LCANs were also a very popular choice on here, but I want to point out that the more important thing is actually the scope mount and not necessarily the optic you're choosing. If you use a spur mount or something like that, you're not going to have any issues. If you use something like an EOTech on the standard mount or a red dot or something like that, you're definitely going to break it. You have a massive bolt carrier group, and it's just going to cause some harmonics and some different things to happen, versus if you actually had a recoil buffer spring back here. Like an AK, it can fold. There is nothing back here to absorb any of that recoil. That thing will kick you back.
Oh yeah.
We could give it to Maggie. It'd probably knock her over.
Oh, thanks.
You don't have to shoot it all.
Good.
If you're good, you're good. Put the safety back on.
But it does feel like a very well thought out system. It's just a 20-year-old system. And that, I think, is two very important things to distinguish and to remember with this rifle. It's very sentimental for people because of movies, Call of Duty, just a lot of media. Just the battle rifle in general, I think, is very cool and also something that we need to talk about. We used to use 30-06 as a military round and then started moving to 308. We had stuff like the M14, the FAL, the G3, and those were very popular globally for a long time. And as warfare kind of changed and ammo kind of changed, we moved towards intermediate rounds. And the era of the battle rifle has definitely changed and I feel like has died down a lot. In my mind, a battle rifle is something like the FAL, where guys were running around with 20-round mags. There were no optics, there were no lights, there was no night vision, there was nothing like that. They were just bringing up to their shoulder, firing, and dropping bad guys in single rounds with torso shot. That's just something that really I feel like has gone away. We have 77 grain 5.56 now, so why do we need 308? 308 has really moved into two roles, I feel like, at this point. Two of the use cases that I really see for 308, if you need to reach out a little bit farther, but it's not a role for a sniper, you have a squad designated DMR. So that is something like the HK 110 SDMR, where you have one guy maybe that is trained, he can reach out to like 800 meters if you guys need to. There is also the case of, hey, we need some covering fire and a saw is just way too heavy. So we want a 308 rifle just so we can lay down some really heavy covering fire and it'll be a little bit lighter weight. People can move easier. But in terms of something like this is a 3.5 power optic. Now I've taken this out and I've ring steel at 500, 600 yards and it was very easy. The ACOG has built-in drop points designed specifically for 308 in about a 16-inch barrel. So this is something that can reach out if you really need to. But it just is not something like an SDMR where those guys are running around with something that has precision similar to like a SCAR 20 or a sniper and a semi-automatic that is compact enough to run around with. But I just feel like the role of the battle rifle has kind of changed, or in a way, maybe I shouldn't say gone away, but it's evolved, whether it is filling a role that used to be filled by a machine gunner, or it's filling an empty role of, hey, we really could use someone, not necessarily a sniper, but someone that can just reach out a little bit farther with a little bit more accuracy. There are definitely other rifles that can do stuff like that, but the SCAR 17 is kind of like a jack of all trades and a master of none, which is not a bad thing. It is a very good thing. But if you're thinking about the military, when you have multiple guys, multiple skill sets, then it really doesn't make as much sense for someone to have one of these. As a civilian, maybe it does make a little bit more sense. But again, if shit hits the fan or you're preparing for an apocalypse of some sort, do you really want to have a loadout of 308? Because it's gonna be a lot less ammo than you can carry with 5.56. It's gonna be more expensive to stock up on. And that's just something that you have to decide. You're looking at proprietary magazines with the SCAR 17, whereas you can use Stanag mags with the SCAR 16. So I personally am a very big fan still of the SCAR platform, and I probably enjoy shooting the SCAR 16 a little bit more than I enjoy shooting the SCAR 17. That's just my personal opinion. And again, you'll see a lot of different setups. Maybe you throw a bipod on here instead of a vertical grip, and you throw like a Night Force or something on here, and you just make this a lightweight DMR roll. There is a lot of things that you can do with this, and those are all questions that I can't answer for you. I can just put the information out there. The SCAR 16 is actually what got me back into firearms. I think it's a little bit of a misunderstood weapon system. Whether or not it's right for you, you have to weigh it being outdated, which there's nothing wrong with. 1911s are outdated, MP5s are outdated, but they're still used today and they're still awesome weapons, and this is still an awesome weapon. It's up to you to decide, is this the right weapon for you? And I can't answer that for you. But if it's something you love and you've made it this far through the video, I would say that you have all the information that you need to know, and if you pick it up, enjoy your SCAR. They're awesome weapons and I don't think you'll regret it.